And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
And I am JC Kenney, and I feel like taking a trip in the Wayback Machine, Sarah, so I think it's time to get bookish.
My favorite thing to do. We are very excited today to be joined by a very accomplished new author in the mystery sphere. Elizabeth Crowens, you have had a blockbuster with your debut series for the Babs Norman Golden Age Mysteries, the Golden Age of Hollywood Mysteries. You have been nominated for the Agatha. You've got some of the, I think I pronounce it incorrectly, the Chancelier. Yes, that one. You've got several nominations from there, a Silver Falchion, so amazing. So we're very excited to chat with you especially about your newest book, Bye Bye Blackbird, where we are taken back to the 1940s, where Humphrey Bogart stumbles into a detective agency needing some assistance on the set of the Maltese Falcon. So we have got a lot of ground to cover. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
For folks who may not be familiar with you and your work, can you give us a little bit of an introduction to your background, what got you into writing, and specifically what led you to writing mysteries?
Well, I worked in the movie industry for many, many years in a lot of I wore a lot of different hats in the movie industry. I was primarily a still photographer. I worked with publicity departments, but I also did everything from story analysis, which is basically slush file reading, to working with wardrobe departments and providing period wardrobe. So, as I said, I wore a lot of different hats in the industry. And I originally moved out to Los Angeles to be a screenwriter. But I was a single mom. And unless you get into a writer's room in the television area, it's all spec work. You could be churning out all sorts of scripts and you're not going to get a paycheck at the end of the week. So it's all speculative. It's like being a writer and trying to, submit your manuscript, basically. So I needed a day job. And my background was photography and cinematography. So I broke in doing still photography on movie sets. So, but in the background, I really wanted to be a writer. So I really didn't get to start writing. Actually, I did start a science fiction book, actually, way back in the 80s.
Ooh, fun.
But it stayed in, and this was before computers. It was on a typewriter, and the manuscript stayed in a box for years because I really, as I said, as a single mom, and if anybody knows anything about the movie industry, we work really long hours. So I did not have time, between raising a family by myself and working the day job. So it wasn't until I got out of actual physical film production that I was able to get back into writing again.
Oh, nice. Wow, that is, I have 100 questions about just your time working on movies alone, but we're going to focus more on your writing and the fact that you have crafted these really fun, vivid, atmospheric mysteries that take us back to this golden age of Hollywood, where we get to see all of these characters that we have heard about as legends of the cinema, and actually kind of get to learn more about them and get to know them. But before we do that, I do want to say hello to our viewers who are joining us online. We have DHB saying good afternoon in the chat. We've got Regina Williams saying hello, everyone. And we have Farmer House Reader saying hi, all, with a smiley face. So thank you guys for being here. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to pop them in the chat as we begin talking with Elizabeth. And we are going to be focusing on the newest book in your series, which is Bye Bye Blackbird. That's book 2. But maybe before we get into that, can you kind of set the stage for us about who Babs Norman is and why she has decided to start her own private detective agency?
Well, Babs Norman was actually based on my best friend.
Ooh, fun.
And
how fun.
yes, no, a real person. And she was an actress in Hollywood in the 40s, very frustrated, and ended up getting out of it and ended up doing a lot of other things. But I was taking care of this woman, and she would tell me stories, and she gave me albums of photographs, and she would talk about what she did. And she wanted me to write her memoir. And unfortunately, she's not famous or infamous. And when it comes to writing memoirs, those are the people, you get people like Hillary Clinton gets a 7-figure advance, or, you get Kim Kardashian, somebody would bend over backwards to write her memoir. However, for somebody that nobody's ever heard of, I had a friend who climbed Mount Everest, and he could not get his memoir published. So it's just incredibly difficult. And I was trying to figure out how to repackage her. And all of a sudden, the light bulb went off one day. And I said, you know what? What kind of books do you always read? Mysteries. Okay. What do you watch on television? She used to watch Law and Order, Murder, She Wrote, Animal Planet. She was very much into animals and animal rescue. And she loved Turner Classic Movies. So I said, I'm going to fictionalize you. And I'm going to make you a female PI, which is very unusual in the 1940s. But you were a former actress, and you're going to have celebrity clients. There's also going to be an animal factor in there. You're always going to be like bringing in stray kittens or stray dogs. And because that was very much of her real personality. So she said, I love it. And we made it official. We took her estate attorney, and he, wrote that I had the legal rights to, develop the series based on some of the stories that she told me. Oh, wow. And that's where we went with it. And I was trying to figure out, since we were talking about 1940s, I have a background with Sherlock Holmes. And I hang out with a lot of people who are like Sherlock aficionados. And I think Basil Rathbone, he was the first person that I actually was introduced, to as Sherlock Holmes. So I wrote the first one as Basil, being one of her celebrity clients. We won't get too much into the first book, but all of a sudden I'm thinking, book 2, the first one took place in 1940. What's a big film that we could get involved with in 1941? And I'm thinking, Maltese Falcon, right? And when I was working on the first book, I wanted to check out about different celebrities that had dogs. And Humphrey Bogart was a huge dog lover. And since the first book, which is Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, is about celebrity dog napping, I have one of his dogs that's taken and rescued in the first book. So I have him meet the private detectives at the very end, thanking him about rescuing his dog. And they exchange business cards, and that's kind of how they get to know each other.
I
and
see.
Then it leads into the second book, yeah.
Well, because
how fun is that?
And the second book opens like what you're talking about, like this love of animals, and it just feels like they're in like a menagerie when they're in their office.
It gets out of control. It's really kind of funny with the animals, and I had to learn a lot about birds. I was not, a bird expert. I've had dogs and cats myself, but I've never owned a bird. So I, had to do a little research on that. But yes, it is like a zoo, and it's kind of a running joke. But there are animals in the third book, which will be coming out next year as well.
So, not to give or give short shrift to animals, because we love our your fur babies and feather babies and all that kind of stuff.
Uh,
But I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about Babs herself, the character. You kind of talked about how she's based on your friend. So introduce us to Babs herself, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, Babs is a frustrated former actress who decided to become a PI. And I actually, the real reason why she became a PI, is revealed in the third book, which again,
Okay.
you'll have to look for. But
Yep.
she had another actor who was also frustrated, and they got sent on a callback by accident. So they found some food. It was over at Paramount Studios. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but not really. And they found some discarded food from one of the other productions. And they decided there is a very famous cemetery right behind Paramount Studios. And this is true. And now it's called Hollywood Forever. Back then it was called Hollywood Memorial Park. But they stole the food and had a picnic lunch in the cemetery because they had benches and it's beautiful, trees and a lake and everything else. And they started, griping about, oh, what an industry, we're not getting anywhere. And they decided on the way home, Babs found a classified ad about becoming a private investigator without a license. I mean, I'm sorry, not without a license, how to get the license without a law enforcement background. So she and this other actor decided to go for it. And it's tough because sometimes her friend has to front as the head of the agency because people don't believe her. They don't give her credibility because she's a woman, and she actually runs the agency. So it's an uphill battle, but and personally, she's got an ex-husband who shows up in every book, who horrible marriage. She got really, married a guy really young, and he wants to like kidnap her back to San Francisco, which is where she's from. And he said, we never divorced, and they did, but it's like, no, you're mine. You got to be with me. And the guy is crazy and he threatens her. So she's got this backstory that she has to deal with. But in the meantime, she wants to make a go at her agency and she wants it to survive. So,
So what makes Babs a good detective? Like you don't have to tell us why she became one, but what are like some of the qualities that like make her why somebody would come to her agency rather than go someplace else?
She's very aggressive. She really wants to solve the case. And she really doesn't like taking no for an answer. And she'll do sometimes some pretty crazy things, especially for a woman of that time period. She'll really think out of the box. And she also loves the animals. So if there's animals involved, especially in the first book, because it's about dog napping, it pulls at her heartstrings. She really gets involved with that. But the second case, it's huge because she's got a studio behind it. It's Warner Brothers. And they're worried that there are threats against all the main characters and the director of Maltese Falcon. So they really want this case solved. And she wants to really prove her credibility by solving it. I mean, this is going to save her business. That's always on a thin ice, basically.
Well, I'm glad she solved the crime because, for my money, The Maltese Falcon is one of the greatest films in all of history, cinematic history. So, thank you and thank Babs for taking care of that. So, I guess I'm kind of in character mode today. You've kind of hinted at Babs's partner in
Yes.
solving crime, that he's a man.
Mhm.
And tell us a little bit about him. And you said he has to be kind of the front, of the organization at times, but kind of give us a little insight into both him and then his dynamic working with Babs.
Well, he has his issues too. He is a closeted gay male. And in 1940, in the 40s, you had to be closeted.
Mhm.
So it can ruin your career if you came out of the closet. I mean, there were a lot of famous actors and actresses, Cary Grant being one of them. He had a relationship with Randolph Scott. And in fact, I think it was Vogue or Vanity Fair. I mean, one of the major, magazines had like a major spread in the, on the two of them. And they were like two men and a vacation house and roommates or, whatever. But they really had to, and they ended up both marrying. And in fact, Cary Grant, I think, married 5 times. But there was a relationship. I mean, Rock Hudson, it's a little bit later on, more of the 50s and early 60s, but Rock Hudson ended up getting married to a lesbian secretary or whatever, and just to be able to continue, working in the business. So he runs into issues, and he gets taunted sometimes. He has this thing in his mind. He thinks he's like a Sam Spade, but he doesn't come off that way. And he's smart, So, but he likes to think he's like tough and, macho and everything like Humphrey Bogart, but he would never be able to be cast in a role like that. So I know he goes through some of that, in the book.
So their dynamic is one of, and it's one thing that like really comes through in the praise for your series, Elizabeth, is how Babs and Guy, how they have this kind of brother-sister dynamic and how they have a really good relationship working with each other. So you told us a little bit about their origin story, but like what makes them a good team when it comes to solving mysteries?
Well, sometimes they're not always the best team. That's there is a little bit of Nick. In fact, I joke about it in the first book because there's a lot of Nick and Nora Charles. And obviously, and in the first book, Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, we do have William Powell and Myrna Loy, involved because Asta is stolen. Okay. So, and what's so funny is there's jokes all the time that Babs and Guy, who's her partner, they bicker like Nick and Nora Charles. So there's definitely a Nick and Nora Charles type of, even though they're not married, there is that element, between the two of them. But one thing that I know that Babs gets upset about a lot is that Guy doesn't always tell her what he's up to. And she really likes to know. And sometimes, and then she'll violate the rule herself. She'll go out, get arrested, and Guy's got to bail her out of jail. And it's like, well, why didn't you tell me? You shouldn't have gone over there, or whatever. So they're constantly having those issues. So it's not always, smooth
sailing, but they get the job done.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and speaking of getting the job done, Elizabeth, one of the things that I'm really curious about is could you give our listeners, our viewers, some advice for folks who want to write books kind of like you are doing now? You're taking real people that obviously existed, and you're putting them into a fictional world. Can you give us some advice on some do's, some don'ts, some of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's a legal term. In fact, I was just part of a panel on alternate history recently for the Historical Novel Society. And there's a legal term called fair use. And there's also another term about defamation of character. And as long as, well, it helps if the person is no longer alive. And obviously, in this case, the people are no longer alive. However, even if you write something with somebody who is still alive, as long as it's already documented as happened, and, either newsworthy or in official biographies or whatever, it's fair game. What you can't do, because, okay, for example, I've got, he has a small character role actually in all three of my books, but Errol Flynn. And if you know anything about Errol Flynn, he had a reputation. I mean, he was dashing, he was gorgeous, he was also a womanizer. He had a very big trial. He was being accused of having a relationship with somebody underage, and this was all over the news, and also documented in Hollywood Reporter and whatever. That you can play up because, again, it happened. It's real. What you can't say is he was a serial killer, because that didn't happen, and it's damaging. Okay. So as long as it's, as I said, if it's been documented and not damaging, you're okay. So, that's kind of the rule of the do's and the don'ts with, mixing people. What I do a lot, and to me, this is a do, it doesn't have to be a do, but I like to use historical timelines, and I'm very picky about that. So if all of a sudden I know something is happening in the world, I like to kind of let people know it, and also sometimes that helps me with my pacing. Or let's say, for example, when I know the movie premiere is, so let's say, the premiere, the red carpet premiere of The Maltese Falcon, I put it in there and I had the dates basically. So somebody could say, what are you talking about? It didn't happen in April 1945. It happened in, 1940, I think it was October 1941. So that I do try to keep as accurate as possible. Sometimes you have to fudge a little bit. And I mean, I get my hands sometimes on production charts and I can see this particular scene didn't really happen on this date, but it works for the plot. That's what's called artistic license.
So how do you take that artistic license and develop, let's talk about Humphrey Bogart. How do you develop him into a character who, he comes into this fictional agency, he has a case that he needs Babs and Guy to solve. How do you bring him to life as a character? Like, how did you, what was your research like? What was the method of making him not the movie star, but the person?
Well, I did watch a lot of Turner Classic movies, that I could tell you. But not only did I watch probably The Maltese Falcon probably like at least 25 times, throughout, at least, throughout the actual writing of the book, but I watched a lot of his other movies. Mostly before, some after. But also, it really helps to try to get your hands on documentaries where they're being filmed off camera. So you could actually hear them speaking and see them in like really casual situations and how they're reacting as opposed to rehearsed lines. So it's a combination of that. But he's pretty consistent when it comes to like the type of reactions he would make. And he also has like this funny little tick that he does, like with his, I can't do it, but he does this thing like, he'll curl his lip up and stuff. And a lot of times when he talks, he does it a lot in The Maltese Falcon. And you want to add that stuff. So it really kind of gets the character down.
That is just so cool, And I'm thinking you're talking about all these movies. I have to throw a little shout out to The African Queen. That was my mom's favorite movie of all time. And once again, Bogey starring in that one. So, Elizabeth, this has been fascinating. It's been so much fun. I know Sarah. I think I speak for you. We both love Hollywood, and classic film is so much fun. But in the short period of time, Elizabeth, can you tell people where they can get a hold of you, how they can get a hold of you, how they can follow you to keep up with what's going on? Because I think you mentioned there is a third book in the series coming out when?
End of January 2026. Yes.
Okay.
And it's based on Casablanca.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to have Bogey's going to come back, and so is Sydney Greenstreet, and so is Lori.
Nice. Nice.
So, and how in regards to like folks being able to reach out to you or follow you on social media, your website, how do folks stay connected to find out what's going on?
Well, I am on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, and www.elizabethcrowens.com. I have a monthly newsletter, and if you subscribe, you get a free ebook of Best of the Caption Contest. I have on Facebook, I have a caption contest, which I'll get New York Times bestselling authors making comments. In the morning, I usually get a funky old photo that's provocative, and people just say whatever they want. And in the evening, I usually take a film still. And that one is usually called Wrong Answers Only. And I don't want people to say, oh, that's a picture from the Maltese Falcon. No, I would need a wrong answer.
Now, how do you I'm curious, how do you get all of that, those images? Like, where are you getting the film stills? Is this something that just you're finding online, or do you have this? Gotcha.
I have a huge collection. I find the stuff everywhere. Being a former photographer and photo editor, I just find it. And I just have a huge file of thousands of images on my computer. And hopefully I could, find the right one on the right day. So.
That is so cool. And it is, folks, if you haven't followed Elizabeth on any social media and you haven't done any of that, it is a blast. It really is. It's a lot of fun. So you got to check it out.
And I have a really, really quick question in the time. We've got about 3 minutes left, Elizabeth. So I would love to know, what is it about the 1940s that drew you to having that be the decade that you start exploring your mysteries in? Is it just because the woman that you had been working with, that was her time in Hollywood?
Yes, it was.
Gotcha.
Yes.
That's fascinating. That's such a cool origin story for how the series came to be. Because usually we get told there's nobody in this book that mirrors somebody in real life. I would never do that. So it's cool when people people in our lives inspire us to do these things. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah. And I've got one final question too, real quick. Since we're talking classic cinema, Elizabeth, give us your favorite one or two films from that era.
Oh, gee. That's impossible. Obviously, I love the Maltese Falcon, and I love Casablanca because I wrote about them, series. So, and I love the Thin Man movies. So,
All right, there you have it.
Yeah.
So we have some good, for folks who may need some recommendations, we have now things to add to our watch list. Because I don't think I know a lot of classic movies. Besides, I loved Meet Me in St. Louis. I love that, the movie musical. But does that even considered a classic movie at this point?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
Sure.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Then I love that one.
Well, and Sarah, I tell you what, one of the great things about the Thin Man films is between the fact that, William Powell and Myrna Loy, the banter is just so spot on. It's funny as all get out, but they're not terribly long.
Oh, that's
Because back in
nice.
the day, they didn't screw around with Peter Jackson 3.5 hour films,
Oh,
most of the time at least. And so, you can get a couple in one night of viewing.
Oh,
So
that is
you're
a
missing out. Yeah.
bonus. Yes. Oh, I know. Like I see a lot on Instagram. They'll clip out like comments or scenes from a movie, and my favorite ones are there's like a really glamorous woman, she's lounging about, she's just like, all you need to do is feed me and then I'll be kind. And it was just like such like a good, I was like, yes, that is how I will operate through life.
There you go.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon.
Yes.
It was a delight chatting with you. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come share a moment with us and chat about Bye Bye Blackbird, which is the newest in your Babs Norman Golden Age of Hollywood mystery series. Folks, Elizabeth's website is located under her show notes, so you can click on it right from there to be able to sign up for her newsletter and find her on social media. We do have another episode of A Bookish Moment happening this week on Thursday, June 12th. We are going to be joined by Joanna Campbell-Slan at 4:30 p.m. Eastern to talk all things cozy mystery. So until we see you all again, stay bookish, everybody. Have a great one. Thank you for being here. Bye.